Good afternoon. My name is Alejandra COF, and I will be speaking about breed-specific legislation. Breed-specific legislation is ineffective in reducing the risk of animal attacks. And I will be basically explaining how it has been increasing in numbers, and it is ineffective because of irresponsible and inexperienced owners, and it does produce costly consequences. So first, I'm going to be talking about a documentary I was watching the other day about a dog named Tyson. It wasn't about him, it was more about how in the United Kingdom the Dangerous Dog Act how it has been affecting certain dogs. It is called Death Row Dogs, and it was directed by John Alwyn. So Tyson was a dog, and he was actually owned by an owner who couldn't have any dogs. She had been previously accused of animal abuse. So in the United Kingdom, they confiscated him, but they also noticed that he was kind of had a pit bull type to him. So what they did was they measured him. They measured his figure. They measured the distance between the front legs and the back legs. They measured his head, and they did determine that he was a pit bull type. So they took the owner to court, and within 10 minutes they ruled that he was a pit bull and he had to be destroyed. And in the documentary, you could actually see that he was a very nice pit bull. He was so sweet, and he actually was very capable of being a very friendly dog. And so they put him to sleep, and the reason he was put to sleep is because the flaw in the Dangerous Dog Act was that he can't be rehomed. They can't put a new owner to the dog. So, yeah. And the BSL laws have been increasing in the United Kingdom. So in the United Kingdom, it has been increasing 41% the animal attacks within 10 years. And reports from the UK say that 4,000 dog bites were reported in 1999, and in 2011 there were 6,000. And this is data from this is HES data from stopbsl.org. Also, in many other countries, there have been many acts to prevent breeds from coming in, like pit bulls, and there hasn't been any really significant difference. Also, despite knowing the numbers have been increasing in animal attacks, there are many other countries that have been putting BSL laws in place. For example, just recently in Montreal, it took place. Next is I'll be explaining how it is irresponsible and inexperienced of the owners. So irresponsible owners that continue handling dogs negatively will increase the population of dangerous dogs and increase the dog attacks. People who obtain the dog no longer register the dog, and that means that they're undocumented, untrained, and a lot of dogs. The BSL laws are actually specific to registered dogs. So all the unregistered dogs, they don't really keep track of them. So in Ontario specifically, Ontario, Canada, the amount of illegal dogs grows a substantial amount. And undocumented, unregistered, unaccounted pit bulls have been there more than ever before. And this is all because of the BSL laws. In reality, a lot of the breeds are really hard to determine. So breed-specific legislation can be really, I guess you could say, wrong, because even with expertise, it's really hard to determine the law. Also, breed-specific laws cost a lot of money. The creating, reversing, regulating of the process is really expensive and can cost taxpayers up to $68,000 per dog. So that could equate to $560,000 a year in a short period of time, maybe even more. Euthanizing innocent dogs that show no sign of aggression is actually contradictory to the purpose of the BSL laws. BSL laws is actually to control the risk of dogs who are probably going to attack, so it's very ineffective in that aspect. Irresponsible dog owners actually do resort to other breeds, making it harder to choose which breeds should be banned. And this, in an article by Sophia Hussey, and she said that the breeds do affect, are actually not effective in showing that some dogs will be liked. So, in conclusion, breed-specific legislation is ineffective in reducing the risk of animal attacks because of irresponsible, inexperienced owners. There are costly consequences, and the numbers have been increasing despite the laws being in place.
All right, Alejandra, the topic is kind of identified, but unless people are familiar with it, I think you need to have a little bit of context and explanation about what's going on. For a lot of people, I think the first minute or so, they would be wondering what breed-specific legislation is, and you don't really get to it until after you've done your preview and you're into the first point. So it's likely that a lot of people are going to be wondering, well, wait, where are we headed with this? They might not even know that you were talking about dogs until you got to that first point. So I think you need a little bit bigger introduction that sets up the controversy for us. There is a preview of what the structure is going to be, although you rushed through it very quickly. And I thought when you got to the body of the speech that you didn't do a very clear job at indicating what the first supporting point was. Now later on there are a couple of points where you do signpost a bit. At least I know that you've changed subjects, but the claims on those other points are not very clear. You talked about irresponsible and inexperienced owners, and it wasn't quite clear what inference you want us to draw. I think the inference that you're making is that breed-specific legislation drives irresponsible owners underground with their ownership or something like that. So in essence, that people who have these dogs because of the laws, instead of not having the dogs at all, they have the dogs, but they do so outside of the rules of registration, and then we don't have any record of them. We're not able to keep track of them. That sounds like the argument that's being made there. You had pieces of information that you presented that were not given any sources or explanation. I don't know where the figure for $68,000 per violation came up with, and the estimate of $500,000 as a way of dealing with this. I don't know where that information came from. I don't know why those costs would be as high as you've indicated there. You've got several examples in different places in the speech. It's interesting to me, although I'm not sure it's going to be considered very important to the audience, that most of your examples are someplace else, some other country. We've got several in Canada and several in the United Kingdom, and you don't mention any of this legislation that exists in the United States. You don't use any examples from the United States, so we don't really know how important this issue is. I don't know how prevalent pit bulls are in either of those other two countries in contrast to the United States, so there might be some question about why it was put into place in the first place, and that seems to me to be a little bit problematic. The only evidence that you seem to have that suggests that the laws aren't working is the evidence near the beginning where you talked about the increase in the number of attacks over the years in Great Britain, or in the United Kingdom. I guess what's left of the United Kingdom, however they are voting this week. You mentioned a 41% increase, but we don't have any information that says that occurred after breed-specific legislation went into effect, and it seems to be your inference that we've had this increase despite the breed-specific legislation, but I didn't get that from the evidence that was being presented. I simply got some indication that there's been a substantial increase in the number of attacks involving these particular sorts of breeds, which would be why the breed-specific legislation is put into place, as opposed to a demonstration that it's not working. That's why you need to have that information correlated to that particular conclusion. I did get a couple of quotes from people in the presentation, but they're not always qualified. and I'm not saying that they're unqualified. I'm saying you didn't qualify who they are, and I don't know why I should be listening to those particular people. Some of the statistical information was a little bit more effectively qualified. You did tell us where that information came from. You need to be more consistent about that. All right, thank you.